Well, welcome back, folks, and I have very special guests on today with some very special props here. We welcome Patricia Kelly, and you are really the widow of the late Gene Kelly, and you're putting on a fantastic show up at Chapman College this weekend it's at Memorial Hall at 7 p.m. We'll tell you a little bit more about how you can get tickets in that in just a moment. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is great to be here.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you here. Tell us a little bit how you met Gene Kelly. I think people are going to be watching here and obviously see that you are fairly young. So obviously you met him later in his life, and you started meeting him. You're going to write a memoir about him, correct?
Well, yes, and I do include the whole story of meeting him in the show, but I'll give you just a brief bit of it. That I wrote a television special about the Smithsonian, and Gene was the host narrator. And he, after that experience, then he brought me out to California to write his memoirs, and I was only supposed to come for 2 weeks, and we got married 5 years into that. So,
wow.
So I had this extraordinary experience of recording his words for over 10 years, and out of that I have a story that really nobody has, and that's what part of the point of doing the show is to kind of reintroduce Gene to the people who really love and adore him.
Yeah, and also reintroduce him, or introduce him in many ways to being up at Chapman College. There's the younger folks that may, I know everyone has probably heard of him and they've seen him on different movies on TV, but not to really know who he was and what he was about. And I was reading a little bit about him online and really found some very interesting things, and I know you talk about some of that stuff in the show. One of them was his way of utilizing the camera and how it differed from Fred Astaire. How Fred Astaire used it. He did want his full figure to be shown, but he wanted the camera a little bit more stationary, just like you're watching a stage show or a play. But Gene wanted to utilize the camera as more of a way to tell a story.
Well, and that's a very good point, because that was exactly how Gene wished to be remembered. It's funny because we all think of him as gorgeous up on that screen, but he wanted to be remembered for being behind the camera and for choreographing and directing and for using the camera in a completely new way to capture dance, because it had been very different before. It was usually just stationary, and he wanted it to take dance literally into the streets, roller skating or with an umbrella, and then that way you have you're dancing toward the camera and everything. And there's quite a bit about that in the show of really how revolutionary he was and so far ahead of his time. And it's funny, I mean, I have his Converse tennis shoes.
This is great.
That was funny because he wore these directing Hello.
You mind if I
You know,
hold
you
them
can,
up?
and
I'm holding Gene Kelly's shoes, folks. This is pretty cool.
Well, these were he wore these to direct Hello Dolly, and I think it's so great because kids today love Converse and they're all wearing these.
Yeah.
But Gene was way ahead of his time for all of this, and I think that's really what's nice to think about. Is here's this man who created a particularly American style of dance based on American popular song and the beautiful songs of the Gershwins and Irving Berlin and Larry Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein, and out of these beautiful songs he created a particularly athletic style of dance.
He did, yeah, and it was interesting that a couple other points that I read about this. One, that unlike, again, Fred Astaire, obviously he did work with Fred Astaire and respected him, but he wanted to be more of the everyman on screen. And he also wanted to get over that stigma of men dancing. And there was that stigma, there still is, I think, today. And he brought in that athletic style and talked about that, didn't he?
Well, it was really one of his big personal crusades, and he did a television special for Omnibus called Dancing, a Man's Game, which was specifically for that. And yes, he thought that grace and masculinity went hand in hand, and his heroes as a little boy growing up were Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Lon Chaney and Buster Keaton and the daring do of Fairbanks, and Gene even learned how to fence. He had a French fencing master and learned things, and I think that was an important component for him, just to just to see that you could be a guy on the street and you could also move beautifully and you could be a classically trained ballet dancer. And a lot of people don't know the breadth of Gene's training. I mean, he trained as a Spanish dancer, tap dancer, jazz dancer, classically trained ballet dancer, and they also don't realize that he spoke French, he read a book a day, he spoke Yiddish, he taught at the Beth Shalom Shul in Pittsburgh, and he was a Shabbos Goy, which I think is really great, along with Elvis Presley and James Cagney were also the Shabbos Goys there.
And he did do a lot of ballet numbers. I think,
Yes.
Was it American in Paris?
Yes.
There was a very long sequence, I don't know, 15, 16 minutes long.
17 and a half.
Wow, 17 and a half minutes that you wouldn't see that today in a film. I don't think the audience would have the patience for that, but if you've ever seen American in Paris, that sequence is just beautiful.
I think, interestingly, the audience does have the patience.
You think
for
they do?
I do, because they sit glued to this. And now American in Paris is 61 years old, and I think that what I find in traveling around the world is that audiences are really yearning for that kind of thing. They're looking for that kind of beauty and that kind of romance and that kind of straightforward. They don't want to see everything chopped up and high speed. They want to see a beautiful story and beautiful cinematography and beautiful costumes. And same with Singing in the Rain. I was 60 years old, and people are turning out. There were 10,000 people in London in March to see that movie. So something holds up. As Gene would say, I think some of these things have legs.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you've got some hats here. And was this from, let's see, Brigid?
It's from Take Me Out to the Ball Game.
Take Me Out to the, okay.
It's the Hat Me Dear Old Father
Okay, and beautiful. And he did have an Irish background, correct?
Very much so, which is interesting because I got him Irish citizenship at the end of his life, but it was very hard to prove that Gene Kelly was Irish because his mother had, in that time in the United States, Irish was really the lowest on the totem pole, and so it was hard to prove. And she used to say, "We're not Irish, we're German, we're the Eckharts." But I finally got it, and he was very proud of it.
And these look familiar, but what are they from?
Well, these are his personal caps,
Okay.
and you rarely saw Gene without a cap. He just loved them, and the story he always told was that the Irish caps, both he and Fred Astaire would hand wash them so that they made them softer and more supple, so they weren't stiff. And then he always wore either the Navy caps or the Marine caps, and always canted at a certain angle. And he told me that he taught Judy Garland how to cant her hat. So when you see the great Get Happy number, it's Judy's got the hat a la Gene Kelly.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture here on your press release where he's wearing a very similar cap.
Yeah.
Did he talk much about Hollywood over the years, what was called the old studio system, where you're under contract for so many years, as compared, he passed away in 1996.
Correct.
So he obviously lived through that change there, where the artists wanted more independence, the freedom to go do a movie where they wanted, where they didn't have to be loaned out and or told what movie to be in. Did you talk about the differences of that, what he liked or didn't like?
Well, yeah, you talked about it quite a lot, because he described the old system, which you described, the 7-year contract. He said it was like old ball players and slave trade, basically, because you were loaned out and you had no say in what you could do. And the irony is that MGM really didn't know what to do with Gene Kelly. They kept sticking him in these B pictures and didn't see him as a dancer or choreographer. And so it wasn't until he was loaned out that they began to realize he had some other talents. And I think it was very restrictive, but the plus side of it was that you had this extraordinary repertory company there. So you had the best collaborators, the best musicians, composers, costume actors. So under one roof, you basically had this team, and that as time went on, you lost that. So it was very expensive to make musicals and very difficult. So there's kind of a plus charge, but Gene never got royalties for anything. So
so he got, this was his salary, and that was that.
No, and so on DVDs and VHS and television that runs around the world every day, you see him every day, but he never benefited from that.
One thing he really wanted to bring forth was his great choreographer. And I was reading here where he talks about, in the little bit that I found online, Stanley Donen that he brought to Hollywood to be his assistant choreographer. And then as time went by, he wanted to make sure this guy got credit and the people that they were a team that made him better. In fact, he talked about how he had different people watching his performance from different angles so they could tell him, along with the cameraman, the timing and all that. He wanted to make sure that they got credit for this.
Gene was very, very generous with all of that and didn't have to be. I have letters in the collection that ask, are you sure you want to put Stanley Donen on? And Gene said yes. And I think it's important to remember Gene, what you see on the screen that Gene is doing, Gene choreographed that. And I have his handwritten choreography and at home. But you're absolutely right. What he needed a counterpart behind the camera to make sure that Gene was hitting every one of those marks on dance marks, and also that his head was in the right position, his smile was right. And the things that he was doing, for example, in CoverGirl with Rita Hayworth, this extraordinary thing of dancing with himself, which would be so simple today with a computer, was virtually impossible. And in fact, he was told it was impossible. But by having Stanley Donen and Jeannie Coyne and Carol Haney behind the camera, they could watch every movement. And also, you have to remember you're moving this huge camera out, and it was all, Gene created the choreography and created the movement of the camera, all the musical beats, and that's how he organized it, and that's why he had control of the whole thing.
And he did, after all, dance with a mouse. Not Mickey, but Jerry.
That's right.
And you know, for back then, I think that was, what, about 1948 or something like
1945,
that?
and that...
that was groundbreaking back then.
Exactly.
I can just imagine the audience going into the theater and seeing animation seamlessly working with somebody dancing and getting the moves together. That's incredible.
Well, it gave the camera operator an ulcer. It was very, very difficult. But it was, again, and thank you for saying it, because it was revolutionary. And people, again, forget that because they see things like Roger Rabbit and all the things we see now, and you think, but you think, no, that was Gene Kelly who set that. And Disney had obviously done some very primitive things, but no one had done that live action and animation the way Gene did that.
Yeah. So the show is this Saturday at Chapman College Memorial Hall at 7 p.m. and you can go to genekelly.org, and from there they can link up to get tickets for that.
Yes, show listings and go to Orange County and click on that.
Very good. It's been a pleasure. One more quick question.
Absolutely.
I have to ask, there's always been the rumor when he did Singing in the Rain that he had a fever. Was that true?
That is one of, when you read things online, most everything you read online is not accurate, but that is one thing that's accurate. He was very ill when he shot that, and it is not accurate that they did it in one take. It was done in several takes over a period of 1.5 days. But he was very sick, and I don't think anyone has any clue that he's sick when they see that.
We've all known when we've had to feel sick or have a high fever, you're kind of in a fog. So the fact that he was able to do that is just incredible. It's been a pleasure having you on, and folks, I think you'll really enjoy this show. Most of you watching right now have grown up watching Gene Kelly. Even I have grown up watching Gene Kelly, and remarkable to have all this stuff here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing everyone on Saturday.
All right, very good. Folks, we'll be right back.